Hello, everyone. Welcome to this brief introduction, like a carbon credit 101, to carbon markets, how they work, how they can be used, and who the stakeholders are. I'm Paul Flynn. I'm the founding manager, director, and patron of the GRO Foundation. We are a social impact organization dedicated to ending poverty using climate finance. And that's the very, very first recognition before I go into depth. It's not a grant. Carbon markets are its own business that generate revenues from buyers. It's a traditional buyer and seller market, and that gives us money independent from charity, independent from grants, independent from international loans, to then fund food security, water security, education, and skills. And those skills lead to job security. Our goal is that communities at a grassroots level get the prosperity to be independent of charity. We don't want them to wait for the next grant. We want to enable them and empower them to become truly independent. That's how we use carbon credits, carbon certificates, and the carbon market. It's a tool to create impact. And the goal is, like I said, to end poverty. So let's go to the first slide. That's an applause already. Thank you so much. In the simplest form, and I'm looking on at one niche of the carbon market, I'm looking at carbon certification to achieve net zero in the market. At the highest level, all you really need to know is that United Nations and all member states agreed to measure the carbon emissions that go into the air. Carbon emissions are basically like, we produce carbon. I breathe oxygen in, I breathe carbon out. So when you drive a car, when you fly a plane, when a truck transports something, when you take oil into the ground, when you produce plastics, when you produce energy, electricity, make cement, every industrial process creates carbon emissions that go into the air. This is not even a matter of climate change. It is a matter of just pollution. And the same way you produce rubbish and waste at home, and then you bring it into waste bin, and you pay for someone to collect that waste, companies and countries now need to pay to remove the carbon from the air that they created. It's as simple as that. I created waste, and now I have to pay for it to be taken out. That is the entire carbon market. Now, what we do, and what anybody in carbon development does, is prove that they took those carbon emissions out of the air. And that's what this quick introduction is about. How do you prove that you took carbon emissions out of the air permanently? That's the key word. So whenever you think of carbon markets, it's a business like anything else. There's suppliers, brokers, manufacturers, supply chain compliance, materials, contracts you need to create. Like in any other business, our business is about proving that we took CO2 out of the air permanently. Arrow up, arrow down, 1 + 1 = 0, and now economies become net zero, carbon neutral. That's it. First slide. So what's the beginning of the journey? Will I get applause for everything I say? That's amazing. You have to applaud at home as well. I can see you on the toilet. I can. Don't. Thank you. Anyway, where's the start of the journey? When we want to create social impact, what is the source of that money? We chose to put the charity model on its head. Charity means an NGO with well-meaning wants to help a community to prosper. This community is asking for money, but the charity also needs to ask for money. What we do is create a product, and there's demand for that product. So maybe you've heard within the United Nations, or in most countries I'm talking about, net zero. And maybe you've heard about the green economy. Maybe you've heard about the 2030, the 2040, the 2050 goals. I won't go into the details of that. Just in a nutshell, all the countries in the world have decided that the businesses and the economies have to take that carbon out. So where is that demand generated? All the businesses of a certain size in countries that launch the carbon markets have to create a so-called ESG report. It's called differently, there's many different reports, but at the highest level, it's the environmental, social governance of that business. And there's many things they measure, but the corner that we're interested in is their energy efficiency. So for example, you're a business and you're producing 100 tons of carbon emissions. The government then says, yeah, you're stock listed, by 2030, those emissions have to be reduced by 50%. So every year you start with 100%, 100 tons every year. By 2030, you can only produce 50 tons a year. That happens through recycling, that happens through waste management, that happens through switching to renewable energy, it happens through reusing things, it happens through energy efficiency, it happens through using electric vehicles, it happens by working from home. There are many ways to reduce waste and avoid waste. So by 2030, they have to reduce their emissions on average every year by 50%. By 2040, it has to be 80%. By 2050, it has to be zero. After 2050, it has to go negative. And this report documents all the processes, and then it might say, like you see here on this presentation, my company we did all these things, but 1 ton of carbon emissions, our arrow is 1 ton of carbon emissions that we put into the air. Remember, arrow up, arrow down. So companies, by law of a certain size, must create this report, and I can read it. And it says, I need 1 ton of emissions to be cleaned away. And what we do is that entire process so that we can prove that we took that arrow out. And it starts with a so-called project design document, a PDD. A project design document, in our case, we do it through forest restoration. We create a plan that says, well, in our case, we want to plant trees. We want to keep them alive. We want those trees to grow. We want to prosper. We work with communities to protect the forests. And through these activities, we have taken carbon out of the air. And that means all the contracts are involved, all the stakeholders are involved. We did everything as a plan to prove that we took 1 ton out of the air. Now let's look into that a little bit more in depth. Okay. The project design documentation, at its heart, it's based on the United Nations Framework for Climate Change Convention, UNFCCC. And within the UNFCCC, there's the UNCDM, the United Nations Clean Development Mechanism. There's lots and lots of standards, there's lots and lots of methodologies, thousands of pages. But at the simplest form, they're asking you 5 things, the 5 pillars of certification, the proof that you took 1 ton out of the air, in our case. So, number 1 is additionality. Additionality. Did your project make a difference that would not have happened anyway? They don't ask you if you planted a tree, for example. They asked you, did you create additionality? So in this case, for example, look, there is no tree. There's no tree. I created an activity, and now there's a tree. Something became green. I greenified an area. But I did an additionality. So I could also plant, and that's something many, many people ask me when I work in emerging markets. Oh yes, I'm in the mango business. I'm in the banana business. I'm in the avocado business. Those are also trees. I want to protect trees. The thing is, it's not additional, because those processes happen anyway. There is an avocado market. If you want to sell avocados, you have to plant an avocado tree, which means this tree would have been planted anyway. There's no additionality. There's a massive challenge with forest conservation, protecting forests. So there's a lot of projects say, well, I'm not planting trees because it's cheaper, but I am protecting 1,000 square kilometers of the Amazon rainforest, or the Congo rainforest, or the Mabira forest in Uganda where I am right now. The problem is, I might protect this forest, but if she's logging trees, and why are you logging trees, madam? If she's logging trees, this business simply goes 1 mile down the road and cuts down this tree. So protecting this tree didn't make a difference. It just shifted the logging from here to there. Now, a useless statistic. Every year, 15 billion trees are cut down. 15 billion trees. Worldwide, we have already lost 50% of all trees in total. So 50% of all tree cover is gone. And every year we're cutting down 15 billion trees more. We are planting 5 billion trees every year. The mango trees, the avocado trees, the rubber trees, the banana trees, we are planting trees, 5 billion. But that means, even if we count them, 10 billion trees are lost every year. So forest conservation is not enough. It's important to protect biodiversity, but it's not enough. We have to plant actively, and we have to plant at scale, and we have to plant trees that we're not going to cut down. How do you do that? How do you ensure that those trees are alive forever? Because trees die too. So the second pillar is biodiversity. So additionality, did I plant a tree that wouldn't have existed before? The next is biodiversity. We don't plant trees. We grow forests. That too is a mindset change, because a tree will die. But if you plant a forest in natural biodiversity, that forest becomes self-sustaining. A forest planting right and then protected could exist in 1,000 years. So while the tree dies, it replaces itself. If I plant one tree and then cut it down, all the carbon that it contained is thrown out again. But now, I've planted a forest, this tree as it dies is already replaced by another tree. So it's not about planting trees, it's about growing forests with natural biodiversity. The next level is permanence. Exactly what I said. We want forest cover worldwide to come back. It's not about creating a banana plantation or a mango plantation. It's about bringing forests back. Maybe not everywhere, but we have to do our best. We certainly have to reduce the scale at which we're losing natural forests. Because one day we won't have forests at all. And that will be bad. Because monkeys need a place to play, and I like looking at birds. Okay, so permanence is not just about the biodiversity to keep it alive, it's about contracts. It's about monitoring, it's about reporting. Because this is why, for example, we focus only on planting in forest reserves, nature reserves, wildlife reserves. We never plant on private land. Because even if I myself plant a forest on my land, and believe me, I believe in this, I know how to make money with this, but if I plant that forest and one day I pass away in 150 years, I don't know if my children will keep that forest alive. I don't know if they'll maintain it. Even if they do, there's no guarantee that their grandchildren will. That forest is not guaranteed permanence. It is only guaranteed permanence if it is, like I said, in a forest reserve, a nature reserve, a wildlife reserve, protected by government because it's on public or institutional land, or we also work with heritage foundations, a kingdom, a church. And even there, we don't have an agreement with the king. We have an agreement with the throne. Because the king may die, but long live the king. The throne will be there in 1,000 years. That is permanence. And now I've already said about the next step, transparency. We have to document it, we have to report it, it has to be validated, it has to be documented, we have to measure the trees. We know every single tree species we are planting. We know their growth rates, we know their carbon sequestration model. We know through the impact, which is the final step, the communities living around the forest and what activities we do to make sure they don't cut it down. Because remember, for us, it's about ending poverty. Deforestation is a symptom of industrialization, cutting it down for pure profit, and poverty, cutting it down because of a need. So by ending poverty and creating alternative sources, we're helping them. So we are restoring forests on one side, but with the communities, we're also planting the fruit trees they're looking for. Because they need food security, they need water security, they need educational skills, they need job security, they need a future. So for us, I don't talk about environmental protection with communities on the ground, with grassroots communities. I say, help us plant this forest and we'll have money for the school that your child goes to. We'll have money for the well and the water sanitation so that you have clean drinking water. We can provide skill centers for you to have training and qualifications, and we can give funding so that you have a business to make money. And now we've ended poverty and protected the environment. That's the impact we create. And this is monitored through a standard. Next slide, please. None of what I said is my opinion. The United Nations created a global framework. Remember, I mentioned that's the second step, the United Nations Clean Development Mechanism, that regulates everything I said. How are the trees planted? Are they indigenous? How do you engage with stakeholders? What kind of reporting do you have to do? We literally have to record every plot of land on satellite. I have to know where I planted the tree, which tree I planted, who planted it, is it still alive? And the next year, is it still alive? And the year after that, is it still alive? 15 years later, is it still alive? We have to do monitoring and reporting for 15 years on an annual basis. And after that, for a total of 45 years, we're still reporting on those trees to ensure the permanence. Our goal is to have a forest that is so mature that it can live on. Again, we're not planting trees, we're growing forests. All of that is regulated by standards. It's not my opinion. It's not your opinion. It's nobody's opinion. There's global standards that do that. For measuring how much carbon is taken out of the air, how big is the arrow we create, there's an ISO standard for that. If you remember the ESG report in the beginning, a company has to measure how big is the how big is the arrow that they put into the air. That is ISO 14064-1. How big is the arrow that goes up? We work under ISO 14064-2. How big is the arrow that we take down? And then there's ISO 14064-3. There's an independent auditor who checks all the methodologies and standards from the planting to the measurement and carbon accounting to the impact we create under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There's an independent auditor from a different country that we don't know. It's 100% independent. And like a lawyer and accountant, they're not allowed to lie or they lose their business license. They're accredited by the government. They check us independently to say, the plan that Paul created is correct. It is plausible. We've talked to the stakeholders, we've talked to the government, we've talked to the people providing the land, we have checked the tree nurseries, we've talked to the communities, we've seen that has impact. Every single step is monitored, reported on, validated, and verified every year for years independently. So this process alone, here, for example, we spent 3 years planning and piloting projects, testing, scaling, working with communities. This work is done to create our project design document. And then we spent 18 months validating it with an independent contractor. I have a question here. I want to verify that. I want to talk to this person again. Everything is validated. And then at the end, I have a validation report. My project design document, my plan, has been validated. This can work. And now I can go to a carbon registry. Next slide, please. I submit my validation report with all the stamps, ISO, CDM, SDG. I go to a carbon registry. And they check everything again. They check the validator. They also ask questions. I'm audited again. And they then measure me and say, after this second independent validation, after an 18-month process, after a 3-year planning process, they say, do you know what? Yes, this is a carbon certificate. You have proven that with your process, with your model, with your activities, you will create an arrow that takes CO2 out of the air. And then they issue a so-called validated carbon certificate. Because of course, I still need to plant those trees at scale. I will be planting trees for the next 25 years. Not personally, a lot of people help me. Those are the communities and impact we create. But I'm allowed to sell this. This is now an insurable financial instrument. The processes are clear, they're monitored, they're validated, they're reported on. Everything that is in the public eye is there. And this creates the key and most important aspect of the carbon market when it comes to high quality carbon certificates. Next slide, please. I can now operate on a trustless market. My carbon certificates live on a registry. And I can go to a marketplace. This might be a broker, or I could go to a company directly, because big companies need to publish their ESG reports. I know that they need these carbon certificates. I can call them and I can say, dude, I saw your report. You have 1 ton of carbon emissions that go into the air. I have one certificate that will take a carbon emission out of the air. Do you want it? And they will say, Paul, I don't know you. I've never heard about you. I said, that's fine. I send them a link to the carbon registry. And all participants, all industrial companies in the carbon market, they know that these registries are also government accredited. So if my certificate is on a carbon registry, they don't need to know me. It's a trustless market. They know I've done all the validation. They know I spent 18 months talking to people. They know I have a project design development. They know I talk to the communities, to the government, to the authorities. I have all the contracts. They know it. Because a company doesn't have time to fly to Uganda or Kenya or Indonesia or Malaysia and all the other places we're active. They don't have time. All they have to do is check on the registry and say, okay, fine, what's the price? And on the marketplace, we agree on the price. Or, as in any other business, I can work with a wholesaler, or I can work with a broker, or I can go to retail marketplace. This is just like any other business. I have a product, it's registered, it's certified, it's approved, it's insured, and now I sell it on a marketplace. Prices go up and down, like with any other market, but at the end of the day, we're a commodity. We're like an iPhone or like coffee. This is kind of the price. Yes, you can buy a different mobile phone. Yes, you can buy different coffee. The prices vary. But at the end of the day, a coffee is a coffee is a coffee. Yeah? A mobile phone is a mobile phone is a mobile phone. It can do certain things. In our case, we create a carbon certificate that proves that 1 ton was taken out of the air. And we as the seller meet on the marketplace in a trustless system so a buyer can buy it. Next slide, please. We have come full circle. We started with the 2 arrows, but we're back at the ESG report. A company produces an ESG report that says, after all our activities to reduce carbon emissions, we are left with 1 ton of waste. It needs to be removed. We have 1 ton of an arrow going up. And now on a marketplace, they bought a certificate from some random guy who has all the proof that we took it out. And now they have 1 carbon certificate that says this carbon certificate proves that 1 ton of carbon emissions was taken out of the air. And that is how you achieve net zero. 1 minus 1 equals 0. That's as simple as it is. So when you think about the carbon market, next slide, please. That's the final one. The entire carbon market, okay, go back, is just these 2 arrows. That's it. Somebody by law needs to prove that needs to document that they put carbon emissions into the air, and then a project developer proves that they took a carbon emission out of the air. And in the carbon markets, these companies, these polluters, pay for it. That's all you need to know. You already know more than most people on the global market at the moment. That is it. Now, okay. Yeah, thank you. So, we as a foundation, we do the entire process. But every single thing I mentioned is an independent process. So, there's the company. You could be a company creating the ESG reports, helping companies measure their footprint. You could be a company that does the project design and the developing. You could be a company that does the introduction to all the stakeholders at a grassroots level. You could be a company that produces tree nurseries to supply the trees. You could be a company or community that plants the trees. You could be a company that validates and monitors. You can be the one with the drones and the measurement of the trees. You can be a company who does all the reporting for the validation report. You could be a company that does the verification reports. You could be the company that brings things onto a registry. You could be a company that sells certificates to a company on the buying market. Every single one of these steps is its own multi-billion business in the future. We are very, very early. The real goals are starting from 2030. This is an opportunity to participate in one of the fastest growing markets in the world while helping to create a better environment and to change people's lives. So I leave you with this. If you can, be kind to strangers for no reason. Have a great day. Thank you.
Paul Flynn, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much.